In this next episode of the Waboripedia, The Figure Behind the Ink interview series, where we interview respected Horishi from all around the world, we will be sitting down with Brian Kaneko. Brian Kaneko is an Arcata, California-based Horishi, whose Horitoshi-influenced compositions blend the Horitoshi family style along with Brian Kaneko's own flair. Join me as we sit down with Brian Kaneko and learn more about the figure behind the ink. Mr. Brian Kaneko, thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely, man. Thank you.
Awesome. So you have your own place up in Arcata, California, right?
Correct.
Okay, and that's like northern, I think you will label that northern California, right?
Very Northern California. Yeah, we're about maybe like an hour and a half south of Oregon, probably
Yeah.
about like 5 hours north of San Francisco.
Okay, that's cool. And I ask because a lot of people have been asking me to have you on the series, but then they're also curious, what's the story behind Arcata? Did Brian always live there, or did he make a personal or professional decision to move up there? But I don't know if you can share a little bit about your location.
Yeah, it's gosh, where does it start? So I grew up in the Bay Area, born in Oakland, grew up in the East Bay Area, and I actually moved up here in 1995 to go to college. Like so, right out of high school, 17 years old. Just super attracted to the nature up here. You know, this was coastal redwoods, some of the last old growth redwood forests in the world. It's right on the ocean. Especially back then, you know, it was a very like counterculture type community. It had very traditionally been like a fishing and logging were the main industries up here. So ironically, there was like there's some pretty cool stuff around here, infrastructure wise and housing wise, because when they were building up San Francisco during the gold rush, all the lumber to build those houses was coming from up here. So there was a big, connection between the two areas. Over the years, those industries kind of died out. Uh, Marijuana growing came in the area like in the 70s and was very much like a black market counterculture economy for throughout the like 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. It's starting to dry up now, but I was just attracted to the idea of being somewhere totally different than the Bay Area, which is very predictable, very, same, just keeping up with the Joneses and traffic and all that. And even like as a teenager, I knew that I wanted like a different quality of life. So I came up here to go to school. And then I dropped out probably about a year and a half after to start tattooing. I think, yeah, when I was about 19.
Awesome, awesome, and that dives right into actually the first question that we have for you, and that's, what's your tattooing background, and how did you get involved with Wabori?
Mm, I, gosh, I think I was pretty fortunate the whole way through, like the first tattoo I even really saw like up close in real life. Uh, so my parents split up when I was in high school. My mom started dating a guy around the time I was like 15 or so. Um, he, I was like 15. I didn't really care to get to know him or anything. And he was very nice to me, and he was always trying to break the ice. And one day, tattoos came up, and he goes, "Oh, I have a tattoo," and I'm like, "Oh, cool, you have a tattoo." I remember he pulled his pants down, and I remember thinking like, "Whoa, that's wild." And he had this big koi fish on his leg, and I remember immediately being like, "Wow, like whoa, I'd never seen a tattoo like that." And he said, "Oh yeah, my friend did it. My friend's a tattooer. We went to art school together, blah blah blah." And he said, "Oh, he's done some books. I'll bring you his books." Yeah, his name's Ed Hart. I thought he said Ed Harley, so I kept thinking this biker thing, like, oh shit, he's friends with bikers. And so then the next day he brought me all the tattoo times. So I guess I was very fortunate in the sense that my first exposure to a tattoo, like truly up close, was a Hardy piece. And then my mom's, who became pretty much my stepdad, he went to the Art Institute with Hardy. So I was very lucky to be exposed to pretty much the top tier from like kind of day one and see what was possible. So ever since then, it really sparked. It just since I read those tattoo times the next day, I just sort of blew through them over the course of a weekend. Just kept going back over them. I had been drawing a lot. Like I was into comic books growing up. I was like a pretty like introverted, nerdy kid. So I just was like drawing and reading comic books all the time. So the tattooing like really, I think it's like when you're interested in illustrative art and then you feel like an outsider anyway, it was like all sort of came together. So it was always like in the back of my head, like, oh, well, definitely tattooing, you know. But I feel like, you know, I had like an obligation to start the college thing. Did it, well, just kept you know, just kept having tattooing in the back of my mind. And then yeah, I couldn't really shake it. And when I was, I don't know, maybe 18 or so, I walked into a tattoo studio up here, met a guy that had was pretty recent to the area who, you know, it's a smaller shop, but he at least had been around and been tattooed by good people. And so it was interesting to meet someone in real life that also kind of, you know, like knew what cool tattoos were, or at least was aligned, you know, aesthetically with the stuff that I was interested in. So I started getting some tattoos, you know, and as the story goes, right, like just kept going with it. Got up the nerve, you know, hang around the shop all the time, asked for the apprenticeship. Um, Started apprenticing, and then wow, you know, pretty traditional setup for the apprenticeship. And then, I mean, this was 96, maybe 7 or 97. And during the course of the apprenticeship, I met Bill and Junii Salmon,
Mhm.
um, the guy that I had started with up here, spent a brief amount of time with them in San Francisco. Through him, I met them, and then we sort of immediately clicked um, when I was, yeah, like I say, 19 years old or so. So I was living up here in Humboldt, which is the name of the county. So like Arcata is the town, Humboldt's the county. Like we're small enough to where people refer to it by the county and not the actual town. So throughout, you know, the first several multiple years of my tattooing, I was definitely based up here, and then would go to San Francisco anywhere between like 3 and 8 or 9 times a year to stay and work with Bill and Junii. I travel with them a lot. So my exposure to tattooing was just, yeah, that was, I guess, the progression of it all started pretty early, like 15 or 16, saw the first Hardy piece, you know, 18, 19, started getting tattooed and hanging out at the tattoo shop, started apprenticing, 19 or so years old, started coming to San Francisco all the time to hang out at the Diamond Club while still working up here. So that's the basic beginnings.
Nice, nice. So I guess Bill and Junie were like your introduction into the real, or hardcore might not be the word, but traditional Japanese tattooing scene. Were you like doing traditional Japanese right from the get-go, or were you doing more Americana style stuff?
And kind of at that time, I mean, this was probably what, like I say, like 98 or so. So for sure, people were interested in getting some of that stuff, but it was also kind of whatever, you know, also being in a more rural area, it's one of those things where trends come here a few years later, you know, whatever's popular in clothing and music would would hit the Bay Area, and then 2 or 3 years later be cool up here. So yeah, at the beginning it was kind of everything. You know, I always had an eye on the Japanese work. Again, through Bill and Junie and just through my own, you know, aesthetic and
Mhm.
background life. It was something, you know, that I kind of obviously resonated with just culturally. Um, but I felt like at the time, you know, the sort of the ethos was like in tattooing, which you have to be able to do everything. You know, there was no such thing as like, I mean, there was obviously people specializing in certain kinds of work, but it
Mhm.
was very few and far between that like a tattooer would only do one style of work. So it was very much encouraged and, you know, almost like mandated that you be able to do anything.
Okay. And then, fast forwarding and jumping a couple of questions that I shared with you before, but a lot of people have seen pictures of you with Horitoshi and the Horitoshi family. Your style, of course, you got your own style, but it does seem to be a little bit inspired by the Horitoshi family, right? So, well, like, what is your relationship with the Horitoshi family?
So it's well, it's all through Bill and Junie Salmon. You know, it's all through the Diamond Club. You know, in the 90s when the Diamond Club was getting formed and going, you know, this is pre-internet, you know, obviously pre-cell phones. So you know, the sort of the guest artist concept and the traveling tattooer thing really was a lot more of like an underground connection sort of thing, you know. And
Mhm.
I think that everybody knows that, you know, on the West Coast, the Diamond Club was very much the central hub, you know. I mean, Tattoo City at the time was obviously like probably the highest energy tattoo shop on the planet in terms of a crew and a group, and you know the art happening in San Francisco at the time. But the Diamond Club, I think, in terms of guest artists, right? They were hosting everybody. Philip would come and do huge stints there. Horitoshi, you know, Hori Walker was coming over a lot. A lot of Europeans, you know, like Luke Atkinson and Bernie Luther and Mick, and you know, it was, and even from around just, you know, the country, I know Guy Etchison worked there a bunch. You know, just all these, the sort of all the who's who of the tattoo world. That was the San Francisco stop, you know. So I was very fortunate in my upbringing to meet all of these people. And yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's almost lame. It almost sounds sort of like name dropping if you were to say like, oh, these are the people I hung out with all the time, because it really is like, it was like the who's who of tattooing. But the beauty, I think, of that generation, those people, was they were, even though I was a young guy and just starting out, they would judge you sort of based on your character, personality, and then they would look at your tattoo work or talk about tattoos. It was very much how you carried yourself. So what was impressed upon me through Bill and Junii was like, this is how you carry yourself. This is how you talk with clients. This is how you clean your fingernails. This is how you do your hair. This is how you smell when you're tattooing someone. All these things that have nothing to do with the physical application, but everything to do with the whole experience. So when Horitoshi came into town, I mean, he had been there before, but I think I first got tattooed by him at the Diamond Club in '97, possibly. I was still apprenticing. So I met him through getting tattooed at Bill and Juni's apartment, '97. And just a very formal, I was just a client getting tattooed, and just had a nice introduction. I think we probably had dinner, hung out a bit. And I think that over the years, I know a few years later, Bill and Junii had gone to Japan. Junii was obviously close with Horitoshi over the years from having done so much work on her. Bill had tattooed Horitoshi when he first came over. I don't know if the first time, I could be getting the chronology wrong, but anyway, they were really tight. So it was all through Bill and Junii. And then over the years, the tighter and tighter and tighter they got, just by proxy, me staying with Bill and Junii over the years as their helper. They were my mentors. So I would, like, again, travel with them, work with them. So where they would go, I would kind of go. So the relationship with Horitoshi, just to sort of end the ramble, is that basically Bill and Horitoshi, Junii and Horitoshi, that's her, her sensei, her not literal teacher, but that concept, that overall concept. And then Bill and Horitoshi were very much like sworn brothers, so it's family. Bill had the Horitoshi mon tattooed on him. They were very, interconnected. So when I would like go to Japan, or when he would come, if Horitoshi would come to America and he was doing a convention, I would try to go there just to support. You don't have to do anything other than, hey, look, I paid for a plane ticket and a hotel room and I'm physically here. Do you need anything? No? Okay, cool. You do? No problem.
Yeah.
And yeah, so then again, also when I would go to Japan, Horitoshi would always take care of me, like give me a place to stay, take me out to dinner, take me to the studio. And his take on, he even told me, he said, like, Bill Salmon's family is my family. So I would say in a sense that it's like an uncle type figure, and that, I've hosted a lot of his apprentices up here at my studio, back when people were more, traveling a lot more freely. I think for the Japanese, always liked it up here because it's so relaxed and loose, just tons of nature. Everyone's super laid back. It's such a opposite vibe of definitely Tokyo, and especially, most any urban area. So yeah, like they're like my cousins, I guess. There's nothing official. Like I'm not any sort of official member, but it's through again, like my teacher is sort of brothers with Horitoshi. So again, like extended family, and obviously he knows I'm doing that style. He's been encouraging of it. And again, like, maintain relationships and, with some of his people, and they're, good friends of mine. Yeah, we're like it's just like, it's like extended family. As when, Mitsu or Masa or, Shinji or these guys come over to San Francisco to hang out, Junii takes them in as her own children, So we're sort of again, extended family.
Nice. Awesome.
But not
awesome.
enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm sure a lot of people were curious about that one, and now here we have the whole, well, not the whole, but a good chunk of the story right at a high level. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. I've seen a lot of your pictures with your family there, right? So I myself was very curious. Hey, what's going on? Brian's style looks amazing. It also looks a little bit, Horitoshi
very
vibes.
much. That's always that's been my number one influence. When I was younger, I would sort of like try this or that or different things. And, I'm almost my biggest regret in tattooing would be that I didn't just stick with it from day one. I was able to have exposure to that art, those people, that style, but like you're young, you want to try all these different things, And so ironically, I just came back, not ironically, I was able to come back to the stuff that attracted me at the very, very, very beginning is what I've ended up, I guess where I didn't ended up, but I've just been fortunate enough to make, a full-time career out of, or full-time pursuit out of,
Yeah.
Instagram
Awesome.
definitely changed everything in terms of like pairing up clients with tattooers. I always call it like a matchmaking service. You're sort of distilling down, right? Like, oh, I'm interested in tattoos. So I'm gonna, oh, Japanese tattoos. This is cool. So then you start to go down the wormhole exploring Japanese tattooing. And then you kind of go, oh, well, you'll notice people really go like, oh, well, this is the style or sort of Japanese tattooing I like. And then they start to go, oh, well, these are the people that do that. And then, it sort of distills it down. And then a lot of times it's like, oh, well, I can't get to Japan, or, you know, um, and it's funny, people, you tend to attract the same kind of people. Like I tattoo a lot of people that travel from out of the area. And so you're doing just, email correspondence with these people. And we have a joke at the studio, that like 99 out of 100 times it's a very similar type person. They have like a similar energy, look, present themselves similarly. So it is very much like a like energies attract situation. um, the people that are able to sort of distill down to, sort of curate like this is it. This is what I resonate with. They obviously have something in common.
Yeah. Awesome. That's pretty, that's pretty cool. And that's funny how, yeah, it's this one high level type, same type of person, looking for the same style, which makes a lot of sense, right? Uh, awesome. Yeah, and you know what? I think a lot of people who might not have a lot of traditional Japanese or even remotely legitimate Japanese style tattoos, where do they start? Right? They'll go to YouTube, they'll go to Instagram. If they're a little bit more, I don't know, internet savvy, they'll go to Reddit, right, and look over there. And so, these interviews that we're doing right now, and then all the posts that I do is part of the Instagram, right? It's just to spread the knowledge and spread the high quality, caliber Horishi out there. So
I don't know if you
cool.
realize this. I mean, do you find it to be kind of a small, the more you dig deep into it, as expansive as tattooing is, and as much tattooing is out there, and as many people doing Japanese tattooing and all that, it's still a pretty small, I feel, community of people that give you that feeling or
Yeah,
that look when you see their work and go, well, why does that just feel more authentic or more something? Or,
yeah,
not that it's any better or worse, I wouldn't, not to compare things, but I feel like when you distill it down, I talk to other tattooers about this sometimes too. I mean, there's really, especially outside of Japan, I mean, I don't know, there's not a ton of people I feel like doing, and there's again, like doing work that has a certain feeling that attracts that certain kind of
yeah,
person. If that
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Awesome. So actually going back to the person that we're talking here, Brian, obviously, what can you tell us about your colors and your composition style?
Mm, I'm really not, I'm not that good with color. I don't really like, I don't think about colors too much. To me, that's sort of an afterthought. I think it's Japanese. I think with tattooing, most of the tattooing in general, and like I would say, let's say tattoo styles that were meant to be art styles that were meant to be tattooed, right? Traditional Americana, Japanese work, tribal, these sort of designs that were very specifically meant to be tattooed on the body versus other art that's been adapted to be tattooed on the body. Um, I think it's all about line work, composition, shading, and the colors, like just some icing on the cake if you want it. You know what I mean? The design, if you look at a lot of like if you look at a line drawing for a Japanese piece, it looks complete as a line drawing, in my opinion. Or even a traditional Americana tattoo, rather than like, sort of a loose sketch. I'll put some shading here and I'll do this and that. Nothing wrong with that as a style. But to me, like what attracts me again, going back to like having a comic book background to everything, is the illustrative quality. So for me, composition wise, very much about the line. If it looks good, if the foreground subject looks good as a line drawing, that's enough. Everything else will fall into place. And then in terms of the background composition, um, I don't know. What was the question about the
Yeah,
composition?
no, your composition style. And what's
I
your
mean, obviously,
composition style? Yeah,
it's all based on Horitoshi's work. That was the sort of. But then it's like you look at someone's work, and then you got to go, okay, well then Kuranuma, right? Horiyoshi too. The second,
yeah,
his work obviously influenced so many people. You can obviously
yeah,
say it even influenced like Horitoshi. Um, so him, I would say very much so in terms of like energy and movement. What he captured, I'd say the most of sort of anybody is the like the feeling of movement of nature. Like you're
yeah,
in a scene, like it looks like the wind just hit that person's body. I think Horitoshi captures that the best of like any living artist, of the feeling of nature, of movement, of like the power of actual nature. You know, for me, and a lot of people will tell you this in Japanese tattooing, that the foreground is secondary to the background. You know, which that resonates with me. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just that concept resonates with me. So the feeling of capturing the feeling of nature, fleeting moments, things like that, is what's the most important. Um, and again, not like really thinking about how yeah, like okay, if a dragon's moving, like you don't just put clouds around it because you need to fill in that area there, or you need some darkness or lightness there. You know, a lot of times things are pieced together modular in, you know, in a beautiful technical way, but don't. I'm more interested in something that feels like it's kinetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've done a series of interviews already, both with, Horishi and then also like collectors. And that's something that comes up a lot, right? The dynamism in the backgrounds, right? And what a lot of people don't know is exactly what you mentioned, right? Horiyoshi the second, Horiyoshi two, he's inspired so many of the modern living tattooers, right? In the background, specifically, like you were saying, the wind, the waves, and that dynamism in there, right? Making sure that it's like one story, or it just flows naturally, right? So yeah, I'm sure a lot of people, a lot of the viewers, a lot of people listening is going to be on YouTube and Spotify. They do appreciate that dynamism in the backgrounds, right? And that's a lot. And I think I mentioned it before. That's the one thing that, well, not the one thing, but one of the things that could distinguish between somebody who knows what they're doing from a traditional Japanese perspective and somebody who's either starting or just doesn't even care, right? And he's just trying to make a quick buck in the style, right? So looking at the backgrounds, I think it's
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on your measure of, you know, what a proper tattoo should be, right? Like I'll see really beautiful Japanese work from a really accomplished tattooer. Like a lot of tattooers, you know, it's sort of one of these things you'll see where tattooers will tattoo for a long time and then then sort of like maybe later in their career get into doing more Japanese work or larger scale Japanese work. Because I think they start to realize like, oh, this is where it's at, you know? Um, and so it's like maybe sometimes I'll see that work and maybe not resonate as much with the background, you know, but it's like you can't deny it's beautiful and it's
yeah,
incredibly well done.
yeah,
Again, when I just say there's that feeling of authenticity is not even the right word, but just, you know, whatever that feeling is, you know, it's you could play in like, I don't know, like if you look at like work, right? Even like Horitoshi's work, for example. So the amount of apprentices he has out there right now, a handful, and how their work is influenced by him, but also their own, right? And this is like very Japanese concept of copying your master to a certain point of proficiency and then starting to like, you know, interject yourself into it way later down the road. But it's almost like if you like looking at Horiyoshi's work and how much it influenced people. Imagine like listening to a song, right? A great song. And someone's gonna listen to that song and go, oh, that bass line, or oh, that part, or someone's gonna go, oh, I love that chorus, or we're all gonna pick out these little pieces. We can all look at the same tattoo and go, okay, well, draw something that feels similar to that. And it'll all be different, even though we're looking at the exact same thing, because it's kind of coming through our
yeah.
sort of lens. Yeah. Um, and just yeah, it's just so funny. Like the things I did get very lucky at the beginning. You know, Junii would sit me down and give me like pretty specific drawing lessons, or like, hey, or not even lessons, more like Bill and Junii were the best at maybe not necessarily going, this is what you should be doing and how to do it, but more like, hey, did you ever notice this? Like, look at
Yeah.
that. Did you ever notice how that does that? Hey, look at how that does that. You know, it's like all these things that are right in front of your face that have always been right in front of you. Even now, you know, I'll draw sometimes and you kind of go, oh, that's how you're supposed to do that.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like when you're starting, the learning curve is this, right? It's like you're just every day something new. I don't know. After a certain amount of time, plateau is not the right word. But you kind of go boom, and then it's whoa, whoa,
Mhm.
like it just clicks up, yeah, out of nowhere, sort of. You know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that also translates to other activities beyond tattooing, right? I was thinking about music when you were talking about that one mysterious word that we can't just seem to pinpoint, right? But it's sort of like the soul, or maybe soul's dramatic, but there's just something to it, right? That you can tell when somebody's really putting their heart or effort or whatever into playing something versus they're just technically going through the motions and it sounds good, but there's like something that just doesn't click, right? So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I feel
Uh,
like the irony is the Japanese are able to take a lot of aspects of Western culture, dissect it, and repackage, throw away what's not necessary, enhance what is necessary, distill it down to its essential item, even with their own work. That's what's the beauty about the Japanese ability to represent nature in a visual way, is its distillation to like some of the simplest elements.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then, I have the question that I have next for you might, I think I already know the answer. It might even seem dumb to ask it, but in terms of like influences, obviously Junii, Horitoshi, but do you have any other like big influences in your tattooing career and style?
Not artistically, no. Just energetically, I mean, again, Horitoshi is the foundation stylistically and, you know, um, energetically,
Yeah.
how you conduct yourself in a tattoo studio, how you treat your clients. But again, like, so some of his apprentices who I've been fortunate to like become friends with, host, spend time with, like they, they're all influences, very much so. Again, Shinji in New York, right? Like Horizakura, Horimasa, he's back in Japan now. Um, Toshihide, he's over in Berlin now. I mean, these are all people that I've gotten to spend a lot of time with, but just again as friends, but also when you just sort of are, around them,
Mhm.
the osmosis you're able to get. Again, it's not so much people going, do it exactly this way.
Yeah.
You know, it's just more spending time around them. And so, yeah, sorry, influence wise, I wouldn't say aesthetically, no. I feel like the older I've gotten, the more I realize like I don't want to be. I made the mistake in a lot of areas of life of trying to be a jack of all trades, um, and not necessarily, which that's just not naturally me. Sort of focusing on one thing, and it's enough to explore one thing completely. So, let's say like Horitoshi style and how that was distilled through Junii into her style, and how those are my two influences. Like that's enough to last a lifetime.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things to explore within that. I mean, even within Japanese tattooing, like how many images are there really that people get tattooed on a regular basis? A
Yeah.
couple dozen, but within that, there's infinite variations and possibilities. And, um, again, I think it's like, it's telling of Japanese culture in general. I mean, look at a Japanese kitchen, right? The stereotype of like what ingredient wise, right? What do you have? Like a half dozen, 10 ingredients that are the base of most Japanese dishes, truthfully,
Yeah.
But what you can do with that, so it's not so much the variety you need as the focus with what you do have and the tending to and care of what is right in front of you.
Yeah.
So yeah, but again, artistically, like, I mean, there's artists that I've gotten to spend time around that were absolutely amazing, that inspired me completely, but not necessarily just because of like, I wasn't influenced by their style, but maybe their style of working, their style of thinking about art, their style of how they physically draw and approach it. Just not, like, I mean, for example, we had a guy, I don't know if you know the Horitsune family
Yeah.
down Osaka way. Yeah. So Miyazo, he's Horitsune the third now. He came out again through some friends of mine in LA, Chris Brand and SB met Miyazo. Amazing, like one of the best artists I've ever met in my life. Truly, truly genius level talent. Absolutely dramatically different aesthetic
Mhm.
than I was doing. So very much Horitoshi's Tokyo Kanto style, a lot harder, a lot more linear. Down Kansai Osaka, it's a lot looser, lighter, flowy.
Yeah.
But again, I remember when he started coming over a lot. We were hanging out a ton. We'd stay here a long time. We'd work together a lot. And I started thinking like, oh shit, like that's really appealing. Like it's so loose and easy. And like I'm doing such like, it's almost like factory work sometimes. It's so, I go, oh gosh, I wonder if that'd be fun to just kind of loosen up and get it. But then I just, I kind of caught myself and was like, nope, like that's not you. Like no shortcuts. Like not that he's doing a shortcut in any way. It's just stick with what, and I'm happy that I even doubled down more on just trying to pursue,
Mhm.
again, this one sort of style and thing.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Cool. So actually, sort of shifting topics dramatically, although you did bring it up, sort of. But do you have like a favorite subject or design to tattoo?
Um, Flowers and nature, flowers and background. Yeah. Um, Animals. I don't love tattooing human figures. Maybe some religious ones. But yeah, people like Suikoden characters, geisha stuff like that. Like I'll do them and I don't mind it, but it doesn't resonate with me. The decorative aspect of that. Um, to me, again, it's less, and even storytelling wise, my brain is more. I guess what appeals to me about tattooing and the style of tattooing is more the initial feeling it's evoking, not necessarily, not that there's not thought put behind it, and not that I don't try to be very mindful like of the client and what they want and any symbolism we can add to that to enhance the image and their experience of it. But to me, yeah, there is no subject matter. Yeah, it's nature, all nature based. Animals, flowers, earth, water, fire, sky.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, as I prepare for these interviews, I go through all the work. I've gotten really, really into your work. We can talk a little bit later about what that actually means. So we're talking, I think, decades by now. But I did notice you have a lot of, for example, in your Instagram, at least as of late, a lot of peonies, for example, right? And I was having a little internal fight. Okay, which one do I pick because it looks so great to discuss, right? Because we'll discuss about 3 or 4 of your compositions. So yeah, that's fantastic. And when I talk to people, whether they're Horishi or collectors, everyone seems to love for a very good reason, right? Flowers and nature themed pieces, right? And they just look so fantastic. So that makes a lot of sense. Cool. So actually, you mentioned flowers and again nature. So again, this question might or might not apply, but are there like any subjects or designs you want to tattoo, but you haven't had the chance yet?
Yeah, the all background back piece, I would say. I would love to do a full back that didn't have a singular foreground subject. And you see them rarely, but you definitely see them. And I think that's probably the end all be all. For me, what I would take on is like the ultimate, I don't know, not the ultimate challenge, but something like that. And I think conceptually, just especially for a Westerner to like be comfortable with doing that, taking up that amount of real estate with something that just evokes like a feeling, not there's a story or a purpose or hey, look, life's beautiful and it's short. And there you go.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. They're really hard to come by, at least in my experience. I think I've only seen it once. It was sort of like a waves piece, and that was it, right? So yeah,
there's definitely a handful I've seen, but it's funny too because it's I'll talk to a handful of like close tattooer friends I do have, and it's like, oh, so and so did one, so and so did one. There's still, that's what I love too is good tattooers are all still fans of tattoos as well.
Mm.
So kind of geek out to them, be like, oh, did you see that? Or you'll find maybe an old photo somewhere of someone that did one. Or I feel like I saw one the other day. But yeah, there's like a couple in particular that stand out. I know Philip Liu did a pretty rad one years ago. I know again Miyazo Horitsune the third did an amazing one that's in that Perseverance book. His teacher, I believe, I could be wrong on that. I don't even want to say it, but there's a handful out there for sure.
Yeah, I think maybe the one you saw, or at least the one I saw maybe a couple months ago, maybe, and maybe that's the same one you saw. I think Horitsuki Kage, Shad, did a background only back piece. But whoever's listening or watching, you can look at it yourself. Don't quote me on that, but I think I seem to recall that. So
I could see him doing one. Yeah, I know Shad as well. I love his God, how can I say it? Just like not boldness aesthetically, which is obviously very bold, but just, I mean, I've seen him do things with just kind of fearlessness, like, yeah, we're gonna do this, or we're gonna try this, or like, and just do it. Like, I mean, really own the situation. I've seen him do so. I was working with him somewhere where he did like this guy wanted to start a sleeve of chrysanthemums. And Shad was like, well, you comfortable if I just start tattooing it? Because I've been drawing them a lot lately and I feel good about it. The guy's like, sure. So just sit down with a blank arm and just literally start tattooing because you're that confident in yourself. I mean, there's all kinds of ways, you could wrap your head around that, but just to be able to say, like, yeah, we're going to try this, because all we're doing is like, I was just talking to a friend of mine this morning about it. We're figuring this out as we're not figuring out as we go, but we're trying new things, we're experimenting, and it's on somebody forever. And that's a pretty wild concept. So if you let that psych you out, that's no good. If you're too cavalier, I don't think you have enough respect for it. So there's like that fine line in the middle between skating that confidence, and screw it mentality. I feel like you have to care about it as much as you've cared about anything in your life, and also not give a shit at the same time. You have to let a certain part of it go. Kind of like life in general, I guess.
Yeah. It's an interesting duality there. Yeah. Cool. All right. So actually, yeah, I have one other question, but I think I'm going to skip it because it was about the Suikoden, and I think I already heard your your answer to that one.
Oh, you did tell me that one. It was, what's your favorite Suikoden character?
Yeah.
Again, I'm not much into the human, but it would be Kimaru for sure, just because it's badass. The 9-dragon bodysuit, and what that spawned in terms of that being, again, like a white whale of a thing. The 9-dragon bodysuit. Again, there's a handful out there. Horitoshi's obviously done one. And I know Horiyoshi's obviously done one. But yeah, that's, again, like one of those, the 9-dragon body. It's a thing, conceptually, to go from, I have no tattoos to my tattoo will be this preordained thing. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So let's actually dive into some of your works. Let me start sharing here. All right. So before, I usually hand it off to obviously the Horishi to walk us through it, but I'll give a little preface to this one. I really love this piece, really because of the story, not only because it looks fantastic, right? It looks pretty spectacular, but also the story behind the piece. But I'll stop there and I'll let Brian talk a little bit about it.
Well, this one's funny because we've been talking about how I don't gravitate towards human figures, but this was a client that I tattooed a bit before. He is a firefighter. I think has been a firefighter pretty much his whole adult life. Very into Japanese tattoos in terms of just being trying to keep himself educated on it. Book collector, books, movies, just fan. It's great. Really appreciates. He has tattoos, I think, from almost everybody in the Horitoshi family as well. So he's got a real true collector spirit. So meaning, if I'm usually not drawn to doing human figures, this would be like the perfect person to do it on. It is a firefighter who completely understands and really knows a lot about the history, of Edo period firemen and tattooing. So when he wanted to do his back, it was funny too, because he was very specific, because a lot of times when you see a tattoo, the firefighter, they have like the big matoi, right? Like the big flowy, in terms of decorative elements, they've got the big, I forget what that, it's just a big bannery kind of thing with all the sort of like a big jellyfish, that comes down, or a lot of times there's fire. He was very specific about the implement he wanted to use. Whatever little pickaxe thing that is.
Yeah. Right.
He was also very specific that he didn't want any flames in it at all. As like a bad luck thing, or which I could respect. Again, I'm not a fireman, so that was what sometimes you may talk to someone about design elements that may not work. But again, since he was a firefighter dedicating his whole back to it, it's like, okay, cool, you don't want that. But I did put 2 little fire licks just right around the bottom of the dragon. I'm like, come on, just like something just to imply. But maybe like if there's none that implies that he's sort of vanquishing it, sort of owning the situation rather than a mid firefighting scene. But yeah, besides that, like the whole middle part is the roof, sort of the tiled roof section. That was the number one absolute most brilliant thing, I think, besides the motion of Kurinuma's work, was his use of like architectural elements. It's like both your butt cheeks are just part of a bridge, really panning out and saying, here's this piece, disregard for this curve here or that, like this, mind-boggling, his use of architecture in these huge swaths on the body and how it worked. So I really wanted to try to riff on that. They say it's a little esoteric just because it's a lot of black, but you kind of get the point if you look back and go, oh, right, he's on a roof. And yeah, besides that, like it was fun, doing the micro tattoos on the arms is always kind of fun to geek out. And actually my favorite part of this tattoo is the robe, because it was very specific, this heavy fabric. So we went in and did all the little, hatching to kind of show the texture. Well, what is that stuff called? It's not the same stuff they use in gis. I think it's heavier. But anyway, but yeah, like again, this one was a kind of more of an honor to be able to tattoo a very specific image to a very specific profession on someone that has dedicated their life to that. So you have that added weight, A, to the experience, and just sort of B, to the image, you know?
Yeah. This just looks amazing in so many respects. Like you were saying, well, again, the architecture, like you alluded to, and you know how he, well, nitpick sounds kind of negative, but how he chose, right, the specific things that actually make sense, right? You know, like Brian mentioned, firefighters in LP or Japan, right? They would destroy basically these burning buildings, right? So that the fire wouldn't spread, and then they were tattooed. Like historically, they were tattooed, right? And so you can see here for those listening, right? The firefighter has at least I'm seeing two koi in there on his sleeves, right? And then obviously peonies as well. And I like how it looks like a Horitoshi style, you know, background on the on the firefighter.
Right.
That's awesome. And the robe, like Byron was saying, also has a dragon. It looks amazing. That dragon looks also pretty awesome. And yeah, and then the cherry blossoms, there's some cherry blossoms here and there, right? And with the connotation of what the cherry blossoms mean, and the firefighter, right?
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's, and that, yeah, again, like having the cherry blossoms, just again, not scattered through too much because you didn't want it to be too much of a decorative element, but just again, fleeting nature of life, you know. Because again, like the Hikeshi, the Japanese firefighter, it's very like just such the iconic tattooed man, you know. And again, I think for this guy, it was more about representing that and again, like having the symbolism be more important maybe than some of the decorative elements. I'm not bummed in any way on the decorative elements, you know. Scale wise, it's more scene oriented, right? Where the figure's a little smaller, you know, in comparison, because we want to show some more of the background. But yeah, well, you know, in simple little symbolisms, right? Like having fish on your arms, which is a water thing, so being covered in water, you know, things like that.
Amazing. Again, I'm saying it many times, but it's just because it's true. It's just an amazing piece in many aspects. So
thanks.
Awesome. I do encourage whoever's listening and obviously not looking at it that you know they go to Brian's Instagram, True Nature Tattoo, right? I think that's your handle, and take a look at the piece, or just log into YouTube as well and look at the video. Awesome. So actually moving along to the second piece in here, I'll let you talk.
Yeah, Snake and Peonies again, like kind of favorite elements. I'm Year of the Snake. I have a huge snake tattooed on me. I actually have a couple big snakes tattooed on me. The movement of snakes, you know, their ability to seem fierce or mysterious, or, you know, I think, yeah, snake movement is just fun to play with, you know, in general on the arm. Obviously, he's like in really good shape. So, you know, having like defined musculature was sort of fun to play with. He's Japanese as well. So that was always, again, like another sort of tie-in. We actually started it as just the sleeve and we added the chest panel on, I don't know, a year or two later. And so the lightning, you know, the lightning doesn't really tie in with the arm because there's no lightning on the arm, but he has a back piece. I think it's from Jocko down in Onizuka in LA. But his back piece had and this is also the other one where, you know, the client would like elements that you might not have put in. And then so my approach to that is let's have a discussion about it. You know, like, well, I think, you know, maybe we could just do the flower because that wouldn't really tie in because you'd already have that on your arm. And then he was like, well, I really feel like I would like that because it's on my back. And then at that point, it's like, okay, like, I don't own this tattoo. Like, this is yours. And I don't think it doesn't work. I think if you don't see it in context with the back, maybe it looks out of place. But if you see his whole body, then okay, cool. We're alluding to that is also on the back. But besides that, again, like flowers, nature, like it's just, you know, we drew with this type of tattoo, like with all these type of tattoos, I pretty much would draw the head of the animal and the flowers, and then we just draw on the animal body, background, and leaves on the flowers to try to get it to fit, you know, as best as can be on the person. So the lead up process can be pretty long, for something like this, especially the arm. Like I said, the chest was an addition. I think we did that probably like in a couple sessions, or maybe more. But yeah, again, favorite subject matter. Just try to create some feeling of motion. This one again was a little more snake heavy, so with the rocks too, a lot of rock in the background, so it's less sort of swirly. But yeah, just trying to make it feel. This one I wanted to make feel a little more dense, like a little more flower, like the snake was like coming through.
Yeah,
a little thicket. Yeah.
that's awesome.
And
That's awesome.
the chest panel again was matching something he had on the other side. So proportion wise, you're playing off someone else's work as well, which can be challenging, but also fun to make yourself think outside the box a bit.
Bugs. Yeah, actually, that's one of the reasons why I picked this piece as a second picture, because I read the description and it did mention that you added the panel afterwards, right? And then I didn't know the story that the back piece someone else, but then it's always interesting to hear from the Horishi, right, or from the tattooer, the process and everything. It looks great, right? So I think it's a good expression of the skill of the person doing the work. So cool. All right. So let's move along. All right. Go ahead.
Yeah. Chrysanthemums, clouds. Again, kind of just favorite subject matter. He specifically wanted, he just said a sleeve of chrysanthemums. And mums can be interesting, right? I mean, just because there's a few different styles of them. This one doesn't really show the forearm, but there's even like a different style than the others up top. And again, like his personality was like a bit, he's a super nice guy. He's actually a pastor locally. So his personality is very like thoughtful. He's very like, he's kind of intellectual. He's like, I don't know, it's less of like a hard tattoo. I felt like trying to make it a little more, like I say, with the different styles of mums. I don't know, just kind of a pretty tattoo, I feel like there's a little more sensitivity in something like this rather than if I had just had some of the big spider mums and just boom, maybe like 3 or 4 hard ones of those with some clouds would have had a little more of like a tough look. And I feel like this has, if that makes sense, even the way I shaded it, like a little less of a hard look that's like a little softer while still having, again, like as dark and I don't know, kinetic background as possible, but again, like favoring a little heavier foreground to background ratio on this one.
Yeah.
To highlight some of the more the decorative elements than like the kinetic elements, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I like what you mentioned, right? There's like different variations of the chrysanthemum and in different sizes, right? So that's pretty cool. And I also like what you did with the shoulder and the wind bars in there, right? It accentuates the shape of the shoulder, right? So I think that's pretty cool.
I think drawing on the body is really the only way.
Yeah.
Basically freehanding, and that's like my goal moving forward in tattooing is just to like, I think maybe that's a question I'll get to later, but like just I think the only way, that's the other thing too, is to accomplish anything that has some sort of feeling in terms of background, is drawing it on. I mean, I know most people do, but I think there's still a lot of people with stencil background on, which I just don't. I don't think makes too much sense because this is all about, again, creating motion on the body. So forcing motion on it versus figuring it out, take out a brush pen, relax your arm, relax your mind, and just let it kind of do its thing. I mean, a lot of it reveals itself as you're drawing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what I was going to say is that I'm sure a lot of people are jealous of the great work that you get to do, because again, I talked to a lot of Horishi as part of the series, but also offline, and they'd love to do more flowers, right? And then obviously we're looking at several flower works in here, but then also if you look at Brian's Instagram account, a lot of flowers in there too, which is great.
I think funny enough, the more with something like Instagram, I don't know, it's such a mixed bag. You become branded in a way, right? So if you put out a lot of flowers, people will go, oh, he does flowers, so they'll ask you for flowers. It's a little bit of a both for me, where like I don't post a ton. I shouldn't even photograph a ton of work, but since maybe that's the stuff I like to look at, that's what I put up more. Not because I'm trying to attract that back, but also that does seem to be a secondary effect. Obviously, as people go, oh, you do flowers, I'll get a flower.
Yeah.
But again, this is the type of tattoo that I enjoy looking at. So that's probably maybe why I would put the effort to put it out there more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. But also, we're talking about flowers, a lot about flowers in here. There's obviously a lot of work that Brian has on his Instagram. I had to choose a finite number of pictures to go through, but some of the other works that you have, again, the snakes, the dragon looks pretty amazing. The dragons that you do, I like them a lot.
Thanks.
So obviously, like he was saying, I mean, Brian likes flowers and such, but he's not the flower man, right? He's not the florist. He does some pretty awesome work too on other
Yeah.
other
Oh, the
stuff you
florist.
have.
I like that. That's a good one.
Cool. Let me see. I think is there one more? Let me check. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so here's I think one of the
Yeah.
more recent ones that you posted, but I'll let you go ahead and talk about it.
So this one, this was fun. I mean, it was hard. um, so again, where I live is kind of rural. And I guess with that, it's also a college town, so it's very liberal, in some portions of the community. Meaning to live up here, the type of people that want to live up here are you have to want to be here. Do you know what I mean? It attracts a certain kind of person. A little more free thinking, maybe a little more liberal, a little more counterculture, whatever. So I guess my point with that is I will end up doing a lot of work. Like, let's say this one, for example, it's a little more like wild in terms of, I don't know, psychedelics, maybe too strong of a word, but um, busier maybe. I don't know. I feel like I'm trying to do, I'm trying to do some stuff like a lot of the local people that get tattooed up here, making it a little more, again, like sort of left of center, right? Like I've got a couple clients that are sort of, I love the traditional Japanese stuff, but like with a tweak, which is fine. Because again, this is also the community I live in where it's this, again, there's nothing specifically tweaky about this one, but like generally like it's, a phoenix and a dragon together is it's pretty busy, you know what I mean? And especially within the style of work that I'm influenced by, you probably wouldn't really see that very much.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying that you wouldn't see it in Japanese tattooing by any means, but I think it's just a wilder take on it, like to just squeeze in that much line work and foreground. Um, and the reason I bring up like the type of people who live in this community is I think there's just a lot more like left of center people up here. To me, this is left of center for the type of Japanese tattooing. Do you know what I mean? He also has like a big snake on his front that's probably a little more traditional kind of. So trying to mix those elements together where I can get a little like to me, I would consider this more wild, you know. And there's just a little more, like I say, like wild ruggedness in the air around here. So I want to like, I don't know. This guy in particular, he's great. One of probably the best clients I've ever had. He gets tattooed twice a month, like clockwork, for the last several years. We started one tattoo on his arm, and he had some other tattoos. And he said, "Well, gosh, like now that I've got this, I'm feeling it. Like, how about a bodysuit? Like, are you sure?" He's like, "Yeah, I've been doing my research. I've been saving a ton of money. Like, I'd like a bodysuit." I'm like, okay. And he said also too, I'm thinking, why don't we I'll just start getting tattoo removal. You can see on his arms, he's getting some removal. Just to have the foresight to say, like, okay, I'm going to know that I have to plan a year and a half ahead for this arm to get done. But also go ahead and start on my back, my front, my side, my butt. It's the foresight to do that is so rare. And so clients like this are so special in terms of reciprocal energy, right? Like it's like we're on a life book together. It's not just about me doing my thing on him. And again, interpreting their energy. Like, would I normally do a dragon and phoenix all tangled together like that? Like, maybe not, probably not. But also, there's nothing wrong with it, and you can make it really cool. And it's just the right type of person to feel good about doing that on, and someone that's just such a like nut to be like, yes, I want to do my whole body, and yes, see, there's some of the things I'm thinking about. Like, absolutely. Anyway, it's kind of a ramble, but again, like this one, way more line work and like foreground intensive for a back piece than I would normally do. But also very fun and rewarding to do it different once in a while. And as you see, as it goes onto the butt, we're starting to transition back to more of like the background proportions that I would use, like, normally. And his arms, actually, since this photo, we've been going down his arms. And they're a lot more background heavy. And that's sort of on purpose, because the reason I was comfortable doing something so busy on his back is because he's going to have two cats on his arms. He's got one started on one forearm. He's going to get another on the other side. So his arms are going to be predominantly background with blossoms and he's getting a couple sparrows. Um, but point being, the arms on this piece, the arms are just going to act as a frame for the back piece. So that's why it was like a little more like, okay, cool, like let's do something a little crazier on the back. And then as he stands there, I think a lot of people forget that. Like as you stand with your arms at your sides, your arms are just a frame for your back.
Yep.
You know, everybody thinks like in Americans especially think in terms of pieces. You know, this is one piece, this is one piece, this is one piece, and that's it. Kuronuma was the ultimate. Look at his work. You know, those arms. There's totally busy stuff happening on the arms, but for the most part, they're very much functioning as frames for the big show on the back.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And again, for those listening, phoenixes are always colorful, right? So obviously a somewhat colorful phoenix, but then also I think probably for at least for the West, right? Meaning the US, Europe, the Americas, so on and so forth. The white dragon, right? Obviously in Japan you do see it. Horitoku, for example, does a lot of white dragons, but you don't see a lot of white dragons out here in the West. So that's also, you were mentioning counterculture and stuff like that. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
And I think aesthetically, just if you're going to do a phoenix, like I think the white dragon just is going to give you a lot more. You know, it's just not going to melt into the scenery as much. You know,
Yeah.
you look at these images like the battle royale and Dragon Phoenix thing, where it's like there's a lot going on. It could be hard to differentiate. So how can you do something? Two of the most like line work intensive and busier images together and still have it be readable and not take you forever to decipher as you're looking at it, and still be powerful enough to where that's the thing, you're making the sacrifice with background to make the images readable and powerful enough without compromising what they can be. And who knows, maybe I got it wrong and I could have done it better, but that was my thought process, I guess, going into it. Was like consciously knowing that I would take up more of the back in a way that I normally would. And
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's another good point, actually. Yeah. By being white, right? If it was a black dragon, probably, or a very colorful dragon, it would be hard to distinguish what's what, right? But I can clearly,
also,
from a distance, yeah, you can tell.
It would run the risk of getting cartoony with too much color too. Because Phoenix is, again, like even I tried to keep the color palette kind of limited on that Phoenix and kind of more muted, because they can get cartoony fast.
Yeah.
So yeah, and also just white dragon is just, it's just cool. It's just things don't have to have any more meaning than that they're just cool.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. I think that was the last picture. So let me stop sharing. Let's go back to the man here. I think Brian, I got like 3 more questions for you. So going back to the whole Horishi client bond, I know we've been talking here and there, some sprinkles of how that whole relationship works, but what's your view and your workflow regarding the Horishi client bond while they're tattooing and afterwards?
I mean, it's just so dependent on the individual client, right? We're not in Japan and we don't have a client base that sort of knows how it goes. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, in Japan, it's you approach your person and they tell you how it's going to work and you go from there. So there's no one set way. I think that would almost be trying to force. I don't want to try to force some modality of how I work onto people. I mean, there's a basic framework of how I think it should go, and I think that's why communication before you tattoo is such a big deal. I always tell people by the time we actually end up tattooing you, it's just we're familiar with each other and it's just kind of down to business. So I think vetting each other before we actually even start doing any work is the biggest part of the process. I'm in terms of relationship, again, it's so different from client to client. Some become your really good friends. Some people you just admire greatly. Some people it's a little more transactional. It's just also feeling them out. Some people don't want more of a relationship from their tattooer. Some people it's just, here we go, I got my tattoo, thank you, have a great day. Some people are wanting to like be in touch more or to hang out more. Yeah, so it's just really feeling out the situation. Obviously, like we're all humans, we have different days. Like some days I just kind of want to go home and see my dog and my kid, and some days like I'm having this amazing experience and feeling fortunate to be able to share like intimate time with another interesting person. It's just such an intimate experience in general that in terms of the relationship, it's just really being honest about being open to whatever the experience is going to be, and not saying like, well, I don't do it this way, I don't do it that way. I mean, it's probably healthier to have some boundaries for some people.
Yeah.
Again, I think I used the analogy earlier of being in a lifeboat. We're in it together. They have to sit there and take this tattoo. They have to endure these, few hours of pain, pay all this money, spend all this time, months and years. So I owe it to them to be present with them, and focused on what that experience is as best I can read it. Finding that balance between, well, I'm kind of feeling like this today, and this person I know, some people really are chatty, some people, again, want to be in their own space, and I think just being aware of it. There's no set way the relationship goes. It's very organic from person to person.
Cool. Cool. Yeah. And, I like to ask the question because obviously some people, maybe they don't have tattoos and they're getting their first tattoo. Maybe they're thinking about getting a Brian Kaneko tattoo and they're wondering, hey, what kind of guy am I potentially going into business with here? And so I think this question provides a little bit of light into how it might go down, right? So,
well, it's a relationship for sure. I always describe, like, it's funny because I do mostly large work, and sometimes you see, it's coworkers and friends that are like one-shot tattoos all the time. And again, you're almost like, oh man, you just did it and then you're done and that's it. Wow. But it's sort of like, it's like one night stands versus long relationships. There's pluses and minuses, I'm sure, to both, but I think I'm just more wired as a relationship kind of person in many ways in life. So
cool. Awesome. Yeah. So actually, I'm about to throw shoot a big cargo of memories from the past, maybe, I don't know, but I was doing my little research on you and I came across your blog from the early 2010s. You were documenting a lot of stuff, right? I think up like for 4 years you were posting on somewhat on the regular, right? So I don't know, what can you tell us about your blog? And then the second follow up to that would be, have you considered retaking something along those lines?
I probably should, not for any other reason just than personal. It's a good, I think that it's like journaling, it's really all it is. It's not about me trying to educate anybody or advertise myself. It's really forcing myself to put my thoughts to journal is one thing, and then to force yourself to put them out there, I think is like a healthy exercise. I think it's yeah, like why do I do this way? Why do I think about this way? You can sort of be in a vacuum in your own head. So I think that getting it out. So doing that was really much more about me. Yeah, like really, really holding myself accountable to think about why I do things the way I do. And I think it slowed down and stopped around the time I had kids, for sure. Just the time. And then, life goes on and, but it probably isn't a horrible idea to at least, even if it was like on a personal level, potentially to like, journal more. People in general just don't, I think, self-reflect enough,
Yeah.
Why do we do it this way? Why don't I do it that way? It's easy to have talking points and say like, well, because of this or that, but then to dig a little deeper and, once you start writing, things take on a life of their own, explore a little bit like your motivations. And then when you go back, I haven't reread that one forever, but it probably would be a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie and tell you that I shifted through all single one of your posts, but I did read a good chunk of them. And they do read like a journal. They do read very well. Personal has different meanings to people, but like they're like casual. They're not like super dry or whatever. They're like you're sitting with Brian and he's talking about his his process, his thought process, and so on and so forth. So I think it was pretty cool to see that. And then I also figured, hey, maybe he stopped because he had kids and life went on, right? So
100% kids changed a lot for sure.
Cool. All right. So actually, the last question is pretty simple. What's next in the foreseeable future for you?
Nothing really next. I mean, in terms of anything beyond, it's just it's like maintenance. It's like continuing to like hone. I feel fortunate. All the components are here. I love the area I live in. I've got a great studio. I've got good coworkers. I've got a great mentor. I still go to San Francisco a lot. So I've actually been going to San Francisco more often to stay and work with Junii at the Diamond Club. So the future for me is really just kind of maintaining what's happening. I've had a good ratio of local to traveling clients. I've been traveling a little bit more since the COVID easing stuff, going overseas a bit more. So yeah, next is nothing dramatic. It's just the day to day, and trying to find little ways to make each little, part of it. Again, it's not about like new things and different things all the time, but about sort of like tending to and maintaining what you have. And I feel fortunate again to have a good situation and be surrounded by good people. So to just kind of keep that up, the style of work I do again is rooted in one sort of thing. So I'm always riffing on this one thing. So I'm not going dramatically new directions artistically. And that's sort of symbiotic with my life. I'm not going radical directions one way or another. It's just continuing to wrap your head around the same things over and over, I think suits me better than always trying to find something new, if that makes sense.
Well, all right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Brian Kaneko, you want to chill and have a good time, head up to Northern California, Arcata, enjoy nature, get a tattoo, get a cool tattoo. And Brian, thank you very much for taking the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
If you would like to learn more about the world of traditional Japanese tattooing, follow the Waboripedia Instagram page, hit like and subscribe in the YouTube and Spotify channels, and stay tuned for the meanings and stories behind Japanese tattooing, Horishi interviews, and more.